speak to you about the importance of understanding the Indian situation. Now, first I shall try to explain what is the exact meaning of spirituality, and secondly I shall go to more important problem. Dominant, central is the individual, the centrality of the individual in modernity. With the advent of modernity, the individual is detached from the community. We have the phenomenon of the atomization of society. Formerly individuals, clung to the community, now they are detached and they float on the surface of society, you see, independently, one detached from the other as monarchs, and they are sucked into the whirlpool of competition, of the struggle of all against all, of the war of all against all. So today we are going through the disintegration of communities, of the joint family, village community, of caste community. These communities are disintegrating and individuals are becoming sort of detached from them, and thus we have what sociologists call the atomization of Indian society. Of course, there are also other processes taking place in society to counteract this atomization. For instance, you will find in cities like Bangalore, when people from villages come to Bangalore, people of the same village, they tend to live in the same locality, or people of the same professions, for instance, so that they still are able to maintain some sort of community. This is taking place. But modernity emphasizes the individual, but when we speak of the individual, we shouldn't identify it with the person. The individual and the person are not the same thing. The individual is to be taken in the Aristotelian sense. In the visum in se et divisum a colligatalio. Undivided in itself. Anything that is undivided in itself and divided, separate, discrete from everything else. For instance, this is an individual reality. In itself, it is a unity, undivided in itself. It is divisum, divided from everything else. So this is an individual reality. So I am an individual. So the individual is a sort of an exclusive concept. I exclude you as an individual. And the person is a different concept. The person is an individual, but an individual who relates to the other, whether the other is the wife or the children or the family, or relates to the other through knowing and loving. So the person cannot be defined except in relation to the other. The person is a relational concept. You cannot define a person except in relation to the community. You see. So the individual and the person are two different things. Now, modernity emphasizes the individual, not in the sense of the person, but in the other sense, undivided in itself, undivided from everything else, as the subjects of rights and obligations. Every individual is a subject of rights and obligations. A sort of a legal concept. this sort of individualism is both the cause and the effect of private property. Probably sociologically it is very difficult to find out which comes first. Private property created individualism or individualism created private property. I personally think that there is some sort of circular causality in society. Circular causality, one causing the other. Therefore, one can say the private property brings about individualism, individualism brings about private property. There is a circular causality. Now, so the development of the individual is central to modernity. Now, we are at a stage in the development of capitalist society, of bourgeois modernity, where the individual himself is being undermined. Scholars make a distinction between modernity and post-modernity. They say that we are reaching a third stage. First stage is tradition, then modernity, and modernity itself is now giving way to post-modernity. Post-modernity, which is characterized on the economic level by corporate capitalism, all these multinational companies, by the explosion of the media, communications media, and globalization. Everything is becoming globalized. Every problem which any country is facing is becoming globalized. Now, some argue that with this third stage, post-modernist stage, the individual itself is being undermined. How? Because the individual, to be an individual has to be a center of decision making. A center of decision making, as distinct from other individuals who are also centers of decision making. Now, what happens is, as a result of the impact of the media, it is not the individuals who are taking decisions. It is the media that are actually taking decisions. The media, the mass media, the communications, the mass media, films, radio, TV, advertisements, the press, these are conditioning us so much that we think that we are taking decisions, but actually we are being sort of conditioned by the media to take decisions. Therefore, our individuality is being undermined. Now, how far this is true is something which we have to discuss. It will vary from urban areas to rural areas. This problem will be much more probably in a country like the United States than in India. In India, this may be a problem maybe in the cities, but not in villages, because for village people are not so much exposed to the media. See? So we have the subversion of the individual at the post-modernist stage. You take that as a problem and see how far it is true, because this is still this idea of postmodernism is very much controverted today. Now I must come to another polarity, which is the polarity between organicism and competition. Organicism. Traditionally, society was thought of in terms of a body, of an organism with the different members, each member fulfilling its own role. If you take traditional Indian society, you see, you think of that society as an organism where we have different organs. The Brahmins, they do intellectual work, and the Shudras, they do servile work, the Vaisyas will engage in agriculture and commerce, Kshatriyas will engage in warfare. So different communities fulfilled different functions and thus contribute to the well-being of the social organism, the organism. One can also call it corporatism. Corporate. Corpus means body. Organicism also, same idea. You can choose either word.
What's the polarity of organicism versus?
Organicism versus competition. You see, and in the traditional society, the various members of society, various classes of castes collaborated for the good of the community as a whole. So there was a cooperation. Whereas when we come to modern society, we have competition. Competition which is based on individualism and private property. Where there is individualism and private property, there is private interest. And once private interest is negated by the private interest of the other, therefore you have to compete. You have to compete so that your private interest ultimately prevails. So we have modernity that is sort of dominated by competition. In this world of competition, the other becomes an obstacle to your development. The interests of the other become an obstacle to your own interests. So you can achieve your personality only in spite of the other. You can realize your personality in spite of the other. You have to realize your personality in spite of the other, not because of the other. The other becomes an obstacle to you. Actually, even in seminaries in our entire educational system, competition is a very central principle today. In fact, in families, our parents are teaching children from very early childhood to engage in competition. We can see them winding them, as they used to old gramophone records. They used to wind, to compete with other children to get first class in the college or first rank, and this is becoming a serious cultural problem in India. It is also much more a problem in the West. I read that about 1 million children attempt suicide every year in the United States. Recently I met a friend of mine here in Bangalore. He doesn't agree with his wife's policy. His wife goes on, making the children study, till late at night, you see. And the eldest child, the daughter, 14 or 15 years of age, she left a note saying that she wanted to commit suicide. This, competition, the psychology of competition, you see. We didn't have that in traditional society. Traditional society, there was a certain cooperation. Of course, this cooperation was to a large extent imposed from above by the upper caste. That's quite true. It was a sort of institutionalized cooperation, not freely chosen. The Shudras did not freely choose eternally to be fulfilling a low activities you see doing.
So how can you see that the traditional corporate interest can be better than the modern? Because they are also the stratification was there.
Therefore, when I speak of that we have sort of cooperation in tradition, I am not saying that we can go back to the past or we should revive the past or the past was all good. You see, we have also to find out, to recognize the negative aspect, the element which you mentioned, this stratification in traditional society that we have to accept. And just as I am not saying that modernity is something good, what we have to do is transcend, go beyond both tradition and modernity and create a new culture. A new culture which does not have the limitations of tradition and modernity. At the same time, which will incorporate whatever is positive in tradition and modernity. So, anyway, this culture competition, it does violence to human beings. It's a culture of violence because people are expected to compete according to a standard imposed by society from outside, by the social system as a whole. If you want today to come up in society, if you want to become a doctor or an engineer, then you have to learn science. You have to compete along that line. That is imposed by society from outside. Therefore, there is a certain violence done to individuals. Your talent may be for writing poems or leading people or even good at social service, but that is ignored. Instead, you are made to compete along lines imposed by the social system. Therefore, there is a violence. Secondly, competition is unjust. Where there is inequality in the means of competition. The means of competition is first of all technical know-how. Another means of competition is education and certain facilities for study at home. Now, the vast majority of people in India, they don't have these facilities for study at home. The 400 million people who are below poverty line, they don't have electricity at home. They don't have paper or pencil, or they have no tradition of learning. They have no wealth, no education. They cannot compete. They don't have the means of competition. Therefore, this whole culture of competition is unjust. And it is something that we have to fight. This whole culture of competition also is meaningless because every human being is unique, has a value of his own or her own. And it is that unique personality that has to develop. And competition prevents the development of whatever is unique. Why should they, can you think of competition between rose flower and jasmine flower? No, each is unique. Rose flower has its own beauty and jasmine has its own beauty. There is no possibility of competition. So I am poetically minded. I have a poetical bent. I can write poetry. I am very compassionate to human beings, and that is my strong point, and that is my unique being, and that has to be developed. Your talent may be in mathematics, and you develop your talents. Why competition? So we should strive for a society where we don't have this stifling, meaningless, empty competition.
So, can't there be competition between two who are good in mathematics?
Two?
Who are good in mathematics?
Yeah, between them there can be competition, but should there be competition? Because you see, one person who is say weak in mathematics, how can he first of all compete with somebody else who is gifted in mathematics? There's no meaning in competition. It is foredoomed. The competition is foredoomed. See? So this is another polarity before when I must come to. I should have covered my portion. So let me come to another polarity. Here I have been trying to formulate this polarity, but I would tentatively formulate it thus. If one of you could provide me with another word, I'll be happy. Workholism. Workholism. Holism, H-O-L-I-S-M. Work-holism versus efficiency. Modernity, for modernity, efficiency is central. For tradition, the holism of work is central. Holism is completeness. You see, the holism, H-O-L-I-S-M, actually it is a Greek, comes from Greek holos. In English, the same word is written W-H-O-L-E, whole. So you can also write holism in that sense, W-H-O-L-I-S-M. Work holism. Traditionally there was certain wholeness of work. Work was a totality. It is something whole. Why? Because traditionally to work was not something distinct, separate from to be. Working was not different from being. To work meant to be. And the being, traditionally being of human beings overflowed into the community, into nature, into other human beings. Being was overflowing thing. Therefore, work had a sort of a holistic dimension in traditional society. And I shall indicate some of these dimensions. First of all, traditionally work had a social dimension. You worked in collaboration with members of your family or people of your neighborhood. So work was always social work. In that sense, the community was involved in work. Secondly, work had a ludic dimension. Ludic dimension means a play dimension. Play. Work merged into play. Game. Work was something that relaxed you. Ludic. Play. A dimension of play or game. Many people think of work as something oppressive, something that weighs upon you. But traditionally, work had a ludic dimension. It had also an ecstatic dimension. Ecstatic. Ecstasy means ecstasis. Stasis means standing. Ex means outside. You stand outside. You get out of yourself. Into what? Into nature. So in work you achieved union with nature. You communed with nature. Work was ecstatic. This might sound romanticization of work, but actually this is not true, because I know from my own experience I am son of my father. Because I am the son of my father. My father was fairly well-to-do. We had a lot of property in those days. But we all used to work. My father used to go to the field, plow, and I used to go, join him. And then, of course, there are some people employed also, you know. But all of us worked, you see, and I remember in my younger days, you see, when I was 17, 18, salt was formed on my back. You see, you work in the sun, you perspire, then it dries up, salt is formed on the back. But working was, it was sort of an ecstasy sometimes. Even the fatigue, you know, you are all smeared with mud and dirt, you see, but there's a certain joy, a certain mystique, you see, about ploughing and with your father, with your brothers. It is something ineffable, something ecstatic, you know. So that I know from my own experience. Of course, this ecstatic, ludic dimension may not be so much experienced by the laborers who are employed. We were independent producers. I was not employed by anybody else. But even the laborers in those days, you see, they had some sort of personal relationship with us. It's not like today, you know, when you are working in a factory, there is no personal relationship between you and the employer. Which is not the case in those days. So even they enjoyed to some extent work. Even the fatigue itself was intoxicating. That is, I shall quote a text later in the Atharva Veda, Bhumi Sukta, hymn to the earth, you know. There is a reference to ploughing as intercourse with nature, sexual relationship with nature. We shall deal with it later when we come to ecology and so on, you see. I shall read that text in that context. Then finally, work had also an aesthetic dimension, insofar as producing the useful coincided with creating the beautiful. Creation of the beautiful is artistic creation, no? Creating the beautiful and producing the useful was the same thing. The artisan who produced a hammer, for instance, at the same time produced a work of art. But the hammer was a work of art, something beautiful. It was not only useful, it was something beautiful. So the production of the useful and the production of the beautiful tended to coincide. So these are the various dimensions of work, and precisely because work had this multiple dimension, I called it workholism. Work. If you can give me suggest some other word, I shall be happy. But in modernity, pardon?
How do you call it?
Workholism. Work-holism, workholism versus efficiency. In modernity, what we have is not workholism, but efficiency. Efficiency understood in a particular way, meaning an efficiency that is dictated by competition. Therefore, an efficiency that consists in producing ever cheaper goods, ever more saleable goods, in ever shorter time, in ever greater numbers. It's a quantitative efficiency that is emphasized by modernity. That is producing ever cheaper and cheaper goods. That means you have to reduce the cost of production. Secondly, ever more saleable goods that can be sold. You see, if you For instance, in the 70s, if you went to Germany, you bought a bag, you could be sure the bag was very durable. It would last for a few years. Today, durability is not a sort of a desired, it's not a quality desired by the producers, because if the product is durable, then people will use it for a long time. They won't need to buy anything. No. Then what about production in the factory? So the products have to become obsolete. The principle of obsolescence. The products have to become obsolete in a short time. That's why they, instead of metal, they use plastics. And even this ball pen, you see, formerly we could have refill. Now they don't provide refill. You can use it only once and you throw it away. This is so it has to become obsolete, so that you throw it away and you buy again. Otherwise, production will stop. You see, so ever more saleable goods in ever shorter time, you have to reduce.